Guys who married bridezillas, what happened after the wedding? My first wife was a bridezilla. During the honeymoon, she realized she was married, and the wedding day was history. She wanted the big wedding, which she had, not the marriage. The next 2 years were hell until she finally tapped out. I was young and stupid, and the thought of divorce never crossed my mind. I don't know why it didn't. I guess I just assumed I'd be miserable for the rest of my life. When she told me she was leaving, it felt as if the weight of the world was off of my shoulders. On a happy note, her parents were still paying off the wedding when we divorced. That's what happens when you allow your daughter everything she wants, including 2 wedding dresses. My ex-wife was a bridezilla, and her mother was the definition of a monster-in-law. I just handed over the reins in defeat and got drunk or stoned through the whole planning process, which ended up being the complete opposite of anything that I wanted. The marriage lasted 2 years, 7 months, and 3 days. My group of friends, including my best man, his wife, a few colleagues, and my sister, had a betting pool on how long the marriage would last. I found this out the day I told my father, who was also in on it, that we had separated. At the time, I put it down to the stress of wedding planning and thought she was not really like this. Nope. Turns out that she is a spoiled brat and wanted me to take over from her father, just pampering her and never saying no because he said that now she's married. It was my responsibility to maintain the life she was used to. She ended up leaving me while I was deployed, moved interstate, and took my son. That was a shock to come home to an empty house. Her reasoning? I said no to her buying a new vacuum and that I didn't love my family enough because I put my work first. 4 years later, after a long and messy divorce, I am about to elope to Vegas with my partner as we are happier than ever together, and neither of us wants to deal with the BS associated with a traditional wedding. My ex-wife was extremely cranky and yelling at everyone all day because things weren't perfect. The funny thing is, her behavior was causing a lot of stuff to not be perfect. The straw that broke the camel's back was when she threw a beer bottle at the DJ's head when he played a song she didn't like. Our marriage only lasted a year. If you enjoy this video, please give us a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. I married a bridezilla. In the 18 months we were married, she was such an unfit mother, too many instances to list here, that when the divorce was finalized, I got custody of our kid and the kid she had before our marriage. Also, she was a blackout drinker and cheated on me with several different men. The final straw was when I had to travel out of state to check on my grandmother. I came back a day early, saw used Marlboros in the ashtray, not her brand, plus I don't smoke, and then I heard grunting and groaning in the bedroom. Yep, there she was, and there he was, and there he was, doing the devil's triangle. I contacted a divorce lawyer the next day and finalized it as fast as possible. We got married a couple of years out of college in a part of the US where big fancy weddings are the norm. It was a while ago, but here are a few things I remember off the top of my head. She handpicked my groomsmen and ushers, excluding my lifelong best friend. I don't think he specifically offended her, but his personality just rubbed her wrong. She brushed me off when I told her how I felt about it by saying, "I'm sorry you got upset about that." She pulled me out of an engagement party by my ear, in front of other people, for not standing next to her the entire time. She demanded my parents host the rehearsal dinner at the venue of her choosing, was told no, and said she wouldn't enjoy it since they chose not to move it. She saw some trendy alternative to a groom's cake on a blog or something, and decided I had to have it, so she fought my mom about that too. Her mother was going on and on about wanting to invite this person and that person. I finally told her that I would allow her to have exactly the same number of invites that my parents requested. That made her happy, until I told her their number, 8. The wedding was in her area, far from where my folks lived. She complained and complained because she had told all her friends and church people that they would be getting invites. All of this gave me a nagging gut feeling that something was wrong, but I pressed on against my better judgment. The wedding turned out to be awesome, but I was definitely nervous drinking the whole time and thought, what the hell had I gotten myself into? Turns out that wasn't just her stressing about details. She was like that for the next 4 years until the marriage ended in divorce. I married a bridezilla. We're talking about costume changes between the wedding and reception, yelling at the wedding planner, all-night fights about whether we can add fruit kebabs so people would maybe get enough to eat and all that. There was zero compromise. Turns out no compromise at the wedding meant no compromise anywhere else. So, we got a divorce after 4 years of marriage. Best decision ever. She left me 3 months later. After the wedding and vacation were over, I told her we needed to pay the debt we just accumulated. She said she didn't have much on her credit card and could pay it off in a couple of months if I picked up some of her bills. I stupidly agreed. A few months later, she had her credit card paid off. Then she told me she wanted a divorce. We had a budget for the wedding and should have had no debt at the end, but in the last few weeks before the wedding, she suddenly had to spend a ton of money on wedding nonsense I had never even heard of before. And when I say she spent a ton of money, it all came out of my pocket. My first marriage was to a bridezilla. She got wasted before the ceremony and wouldn't dance because she was too anxious people would make fun of her. She bragged to my cousins during the dinner that our wedding was better than theirs and invited her ex-boyfriend to the ceremony. I later found out she had been sleeping with him before and after our wedding. The list goes on. She took the money we received as gifts and spent it on a bunch of random stuff when we were planning on using it for a house down payment. She also had a ton of debt she kept from me and kept spending money more quickly than she could make it. I ended up having to take on a second job to cover the bills even though I already worked over 50 hours a week. Eventually, she stopped going to work. She'd go visit her friend in the evenings, but it turned out she was meeting her ex. The final straw was when I found out what she was doing with the money. Paying bills online wasn't as popular back then, so I would give her money to go pay our bills during banking hours. One day I got pulled over and was charged with no insurance on my vehicle, so I knew something was up. It turned out she was taking the money for bills and buying drugs. When the notices for no payment would come in the mail, she would hide them or rip them up. I handed her separation papers on our first anniversary and never looked back. I'm now happily married to a great woman. We were actually interviewed for the show BRIDEZILLAs. I said I wouldn't get married if we were on that show. Everything was yelled at and never said in a calm voice. She threw an actual jumping fit over the color of ties. People were constantly added and subtracted from the invitation list. Anyway, she was the same during the marriage. It was a typical bad marriage because of finances. She was a spendthrift, and living that way just caused much suffering. We had an expensive wedding that I'm still paying for. My girlfriend of 10 years is very down-to-earth and level-headed. We finally decided to get married later this year, and she's feeling a lot of phantom pressure to do things a certain way. It's not like there is an overbearing mom or catty friends applying pressure. It's just the whole idea is overwhelming and filled to the brim with opportunities to make a decision you might end up regretting later, or forever. I've taken a more active role in narrowing down options, instead of asking her to pick a perfect solution out of a million possible options. It's helped somewhat, but there is still a lot of pressure on her, seemingly out of nowhere, to make a series of decisions that all depend upon the first few big decisions that are weighing heavily on her. What I'm trying to say is, I can see how this kind of stuff could turn a normal woman into a lunatic. These types of events tend to bring latent family and friend drama to the forefront, and emotions are high before things even really get started. My guess is that a lot of the bridezillas were actually lovely people who calmed down and returned to being lovely people after the stress of the wedding stuff was removed. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for more Reddit stories. This is Reddit Story Hour. See you in the next video.